Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council. We're going to start this evening's meeting with two committee reports and some slight discussion, and then we'll move into our regular session. First of all, by the way, tonight is Monday, November 5th, 2012. It's on or about 7:15. We're going to begin committee meeting, Finance and Personnel. Member Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have several items as we approach the end of the year business. We're reviewing all of our accounts to assure that every fund has a positive balance or is zeroed out. And as part of this end of the year business, we'll have some ordinance related to these. One of these is the third reading that you'll see tonight, and that's of an ordinance that reduces the year-end appropriation amount. And that's so that we accurately reflect the balances in the accounts that we have. Some of the reduction in the appropriations are due to grant funds. One of the examples I used in previous discussion was the Oxbow grant, where the repairs on that particular bridge that on the part of Richland Avenue, part of the work is being done this year, but a majority of the work will be done next summer. And so we'll be reducing our appropriations this year to make sure we have that money reserved for next year. The second ordinance that we'll be dealing with tonight, and council members have received a copy of this, and this will be an appropriation ordinance. And we'll read through those in greater detail as we look at that appropriation ordinance itself. Much of it has to do with appropriating additional monies for electricity needed for the street lights, electricity needed for the water plant, and some additional personnel money needed for the recreation department and the community center. Then the other thing that I wanted to mention briefly tonight is that we'll be looking, as we close out this year's end, we'll also be looking at budgeting for next year, and that we have we'll be processing that, and the accounts in all of the different departments will be reviewed, and then a budget will be read by later November for us council members. There will be an ordinance that we'll look at. We'll have 3 readings with the final passage of that budget by December 17th. As part of that budgeting process for 2013, we'll have a fuller discussion in our Finance and Personnel Committee meeting of a few items that will be moving forward with next year's budget. One of them will be a staffing ordinance. You may remember earlier in the year we were looking at union contracts and some of the renewals of those. We have union employees, we also have non-union employees, and about 70 of our 170 employees are non-union. So just as the contracts for union staff, we also need to look at if there are possible recommendations for staffing pay increases for non-union staff. And as part of that, we're also looking at possibly separating out some of the departments where it's previously been one non-union staffing ordinance for the entire city. But we will discuss that next week. We'll also have further discussion next week in our full Finance Committee meeting about increases in the amount that we set aside for medical expenses. You'll notice part of our appropriations ordinance tonight, what we're having to do is appropriate some additional monies to cover the year-end expenses, medical expenses that we pay for the employees. The city of Athens is self-insured, so we do pay these medical expenses. That rate that we pay has been $12,300 per person per year, and we will be looking at discussion of possibly increasing that to approximately $15,000 per person per year. This is not a charge made to the employee. That's one thing we want to clarify. This is an expense of a city being self-insured and setting aside the money, so much per pay per person, to make sure that we can adequately cover our medical costs during the year. We'll also need to be discussing probably next week in a little bit more detail about the debt payments that we have yet to make this year. We have 2 that will be due on December 13th. And one of them will be for the wastewater treatment plant, and the other one will be for the fire truck. And whether or not we want to go ahead and make those payments for probably approximately $50,000 apiece on that. And the last item that I will mention right now for our Finance Committee meeting is that we will also be discussing in greater detail next week information that our auditor, Kathy Hecht, has passed on to us, and she has also talked to us in previous months about the state legislature and what's now called House Bill 601, and it is a state measure to look at regularizing the ways in which local municipalities collect their money or have them collected, either by the state or on their own independently. The current House Bill 601, as it stands right now, has received the city has received a request from the Ohio Municipal League to consider a resolution in opposition to this House Bill 601. And Kathy, do you have any other comments at this point?
Well,
or
it just
next
came
week?
out last week, and it probably won't go through this year, but it will be on the front burner the beginning of next year, but it has been presented to the House, and the problem with it, the uniformity is an issue I've talked about, and we're not opposed to that at all. However, most of the items in there are things that would be a loss of revenue for us and the other municipalities. And it's really, I'm going to say, an ugly piece of legislation. Our tax code from the state went from 40 pages to 129. And it's really hard to follow, it's very confusing, and, the idea was to make it revenue neutral, but that's not the way this one is set up. And so I'd really like council's support. As I said, we're not opposed to tax uniformity, but some of the items in there will really cost us a lot of money, and all the other entities, so we can talk more next week. But
Are there any other items that people have for finance and personnel? None?
Okay, hearing none, we'll, as soon as our guests find a seat, we'll continue with a small committee meeting for the Planning and Development Committee, limited discussion, probably further discussion at a later date. Member Fall, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. We've been discussing the annexation of a piece of property on East State Street for some time now. I would like to bring forward at council session later this evening a three-reading resolution, probably under suspension, to go ahead with the annexation under our regular annexation process. There has been some discussion about it being a new process with a contract written with the Canaan Township trustees and doing different types of cost sharing and tax sharing. However, when it was brought up the last few times in committee, I did not get a lot of positive reinforcement about it. So I would like just to go through with this. This has been on the books for a couple years. The property owners have a meeting with the county commissioners, and they need this resolution to say that we will provide services through when the annexation is completed, as per any other annexation process. I know that the Director of Law had some concerns about it. I think that we're getting near the end of the year. I would like to get this out and so that the annexation can go through, because I think that it's a opportunity for the city to be able to help in the development of this piece of property. And so it's following the same annexation process that we do for any annexation that we have in the past however many years. So, is there any questions?
This time?
I will bring that up under suspension this evening.
We have...
I have no miscellaneous.
No miscellaneous? Okay. We have a few minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, before our regular session would be scheduled to begin. We obviously have some audience members still arriving, so we'll hold off for a minute or two. Welcome again to Athens City Council, Monday, November 5th, 2012. We just finished 2 short committee meetings, one about Finance and Personnel Committee and one about the Planning and Development Committee.
Right.
And discussions about those issues will be heard tonight. That's why they were introduced. Further discussions will probably come at some later meeting. So now we are at our regular session. The first thing to do is establish a quorum. We have all council members present, so this is definitely a definition of a quorum. We have a set of minutes that we would like to accept. The regular session, the minutes of the regular session that was held on October 15th, 2012. We have a motion to accept.
I motion to accept said minutes.
Second. All those in favor of accepting the motion, of accepting the minutes from October 15th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes have been accepted. Communications. I think Member Gosney has something.
Yes, thank you. And this is more of a public announcement. HAPCAP, which manages the city's transportation and also is in charge of some county transportation issues, is starting a pilot program to assist those with disabilities in making it to medical appointments or social service appointments.
I sent that.
And this is going to be an on-demand service, so, and registration is required ahead of time. So
That's right.
if there are people that think they might benefit from this or use the service, they should contact HAPCAP at 767-4500. Again, it's a pilot program primarily for those with disabilities, but also, if space permits, it will be available for elderly and low-income residents as well of Athens County.
And as I read the paper that I got, 24 hours notice, was that the time frame that they were talking about?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so the rides are available, but you need to notify the HAPCAP people at least 24 hours ahead of time. So we hope this is a well-used service, something that we've heard that is needed. One communication that I have, we have a transfer of liquor licenses. Actually, Abrio's restaurant on East State Street has been acquired by new owners, and the license is simply being transferred from one owner, Abrio's Brick Oven, to the new owners doing business as Abrio's Vera Cucina. And if you have any questions or concerns about this transfer, we need the notification by the 19th. Whoops. The 19th of November. That's correct. Okay. Any other communications?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple brief communications. First of all, I wanted to thank the volunteer committee that helped clean up Halloween Court Street area. That's huge, and it was impressive. It looked wonderful afterwards. And likewise, volunteers that helped with the safety people walking around that evening. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Likewise, I did receive 2 emails from some West Siders that had expressed some concerns about litter within the neighborhood after Halloween, but they too were impressed with Court Street after the festivities. Another announcement I had, or communication, was just that I was receiving a letter from John Spotforth on the West Side about some alleged concerns with runoff, and I did discuss this issue with the Deputy Service Safety Director. So I am aware of this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Butler. Okay. From council members, any other communications? Other elected officials, Mayor Weil?
Couple things. Of course, Veterans Day is going to be next Sunday, but we observe it on the Monday, so I know your council is going to be moved over to Tuesday. I guess you'll announce that later. So our City Hall, city businesses and buildings will be closed Monday. In terms of trash cycles, we will not have any delay on our trash or recycling delays. There's none there. Also, I want to let you know that and thank you, Member Gosney, for bringing up the Athens on-demand transit. I was going to say that myself, but you caught me to it. And it's a good thing because it's going to go countywide. The other thing, of course, is that we're going to be working on our bell tower cupola up here sometime starting Wednesday for about another 5 to 7 days, at which the front entrance of it, we're going to be putting scaffolding up and a crane up. So the front entrance of the City Hall will be closed for most part. So therefore, we'll have signs going through the Law Administration Building, which is to the side, cut through there, go through what we call the gerbil tube, and then down to wherever you need to go to business. If there's anybody handicapped, we can stop the construction and get somebody in the front door, though. And again, that will be starting Wednesday, November 7th, day after election, which is why we're held off. And we'll continue on till whenever it gets done. And this is replacing some of the repairs for as you probably know, we've had a few leaks in there this summer into the Clerk of Council's chambers there, and we're trying to get it all fixed. So I just want to let you know about that. So there will be impediments to getting to City Hall starting this Wednesday. And that's all I really have.
I'm going to go with our law director first, because I know that we have relatively long communication from the auditor.
In that case, I'll keep it short. I have no report, Mr. President.
That was short.
Okay. Auditor Hecht.
Yes, I'm here to give my revenue report for 2013. I usually do this in October, but I'm here tonight, and I have good news, I believe, for council. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and you can look at it, and if you have any questions, maybe we'll talk at the end, but otherwise you can ask me any other time, too. I've attached a list of carryover estimates, which it would be the first paper behind my written report that was prepared by Deputy Auditor Ray Hazlett, who works very hard at preparing these reports. And as you all know by now, the general fund is a fund we always need to look at the most closely. We're projecting a $3 million carryover this year. That's unheard of. And, we're pretty excited about that. But that's just the way the numbers are coming out. So I'm here to tell you, we think that's what it's going to be. It's the result of revenue coming in at about $1 million over what we projected. The department's spending about $1 million less than what was collected, which means we didn't dip into our carryover from last year either. And there will also be money left over, which is about $2 million right there, but the money that's unspent every year. There's always some carryover that's not spent, no departments, and I would be, pretty worried if they did spend down to their last penny every year. So we expect about $3 million in carryover, which is really a great thing. And so this list that Ray prepared shows our carryover estimate, the revenue estimate for next year, and then the total resources for 2013. And also, as far as the general fund, most of the money unspent is usually in personnel, because we usually try to budget that at full staffing as much as we can and cover everything so that people aren't caught short at the end of the year without enough money in their personnel budget. And of course, police and fire are the main ones in the general fund as far as personnel numbers. And then supplies and services, there'll be some money left over. I believe the revenue has come in above budget projections this year due to the fact that we've been conservative in estimating our resources while incorporating expected cuts from the state, specifically the local government funds, tangible personal property taxes, and estate taxes. We've still had revenue coming in all of those funds this year, however, much less, and next year no estate taxes and very little of some of the other ones. The total income tax revenue is better than anticipated. The next sheet I have here is shows our tax revenue through October, which shows an increase of more than $400,000 over projection so far. The amount over the estimate in the general fund is $222,000. Street and street rehab, there is a reduction, not material, in revenue in these funds due to elimination of grant funding, which could be replaced with new grants next year, and the phase out of the 0.1% tax increase from last year. So they're just back to their basic operating budget. If they get grants, then that will bump it up, and of course that extra tax bump won't be there for street rehab. Fees for services, water, sewer, garbage. While the revenue has come in as expected, the budgets are a little tight in water and sewer. The sewer fund has some cushion available in the sewer debt fund because of the revenue split instituted several years ago. Once again, I've been saying this for years, I recommend changing that split from the 72-28% to 75-25 between the sewer and sewer debt funds. The water fund is tight, and I recommend an annual fee raise of 3%, which is pretty typical. Also keep in mind that there are major plant projects planned for water and sewer coming up. The garbage rates are probably good where they are, depending on any changes to service next year that might be happening. Community center and recreation funds continue to balance their expenditures with their revenue. As I've said before, Rich has done an excellent job with his budget for those two funds. Transportation has a zero revenue projected, which you will see on that first page. So any expense money needed for next year for fuel and fees to HAPCAP will have to be transferred from somewhere. So that's something that council will have to think about and work with the administration. I've also included debt schedules for this year and next year. The TIF money is used to make the payments on East State Street, on the East State Street note, which is now $500,000, down from $4 million in 2002. So the end is in sight. The community center bonds are funded by a levy and will be paid off in 4 years. The EPA litigation note was finally paid off this year. We all know that. Could stop the extra fee on the utility bills. The sewer fund will retire one of its OWDA loans next July, reducing our yearly OWDA payments by $100,000. We were able to pay off the $500,000 loan for the wastewater treatment plant energy improvements this year a little bit early and save some money on interest with that. My last suggestion for council is to consider changing the income tax mix to increase the balance in the capital improvement fund. I've included a copy of the last ordinance setting that distribution, which goes back to 2005. A few times this year, there have been things come up, and the administration is looking, where can I find money to do that? And the capital fund has not very much money in it, and it would be nice to have that for things like the cupola repair on City Hall. There's no money in any of our budgets, those of us who work here, for things like that. So it's something to think about. As we close out October and November, I will have more accurate figures and continue to update you for the final budgeting process. Please keep in mind that while thoughtful and based on experience, these projections are just that, projections. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank a number of people, the auditor's office for carefully monitoring this during the year and keeping us apprised of it. We do have the carryover, and it's just like your own bank balance. At the end of the year, you don't absolutely want to be at zero. You want a little bit in there for, in a household, it would be money for groceries and rent and things like that. For us, it's personnel. I mean, the vast majority of our expenses, probably 70% of our general fund at least, is for the staff we pay for.
Right. In January, we need about $600,000 just to make those first two payrolls in the
Right.
general fund.
So we need that little bit of cushion in there to be able to pay the anticipated payroll for everybody. But the other people I'd like to thank, as well as this careful monitoring of the revenue that's come in, is also all of the employees in the different departments who have done so well, knowing that they were tight times, knowing that our local revenue funds had been reduced, and taking to heart that, careful kind of watchdogging and doing as much as they can and in taking care of the money and getting a lot of work done for as little as possible.
I agree. I think the administration works with their department heads and our office very well, and there's a lot of communication when somebody needs money or is wondering what's going on, and I appreciate that.
I will point out, of course, that, if you look at the appropriation for last year, most of the transaction plus 500s in the general fund were zeroed out. We've pretty much been pulling everything into the 580, the capital improvement funds, that 2% that she talked about. So therefore, that's where the money bleeds out from if we need capital improvements, whether it's the Cooper above, police cars, or fixes of what needs to be done. I mean, whether we have emergencies or not. Some of the projects we have that I'd like to look at, again, a parking garage, to do a good engineering study of that. There's discussion about trying to repoint some of the buildings here, in particularly the City Hall. So we'll have a list of projects we're looking at the time. There's always anticipated needs and unanticipated needs. Again, Kathy and Ray have been watching quite closely, and my administration knows that they had to lean back. We weren't sure what the numbers would look like. Right now, they're kind of like saying, oh boy, we got things to play with now. I'm kind of leaning back on that too. We still have big projects in next year, of course, is the Oxbow, which is a major one, but we'll have other ones as they come. Again, we've discussed a couple of times about having a certain amount of carryover and as a policy, and we're pretty much close to what we need at this point, I believe. Are we talking about 10% mix in that?
Right.
Okay, so we're following we're following our policy that we've been putting in place at this point. So okay so far.
Thank you. I too would like to concur with Member Nisley's observations. So thank you for the hard work on that end, and to all department heads and the mayor and the auditor and her staff. If I may, I just had a quick question for the auditor, if this is an appropriate time. If she makes a recommendation for a change to the capital improvement fund, I just was curious what your suggestion might be there with that. What percentage?
Well, that's why I put a copy of that 2005 ordinance on there, so you can see what goes where.
Right, thank you.
I don't know. It wouldn't have to be that much, 1 or 2%, but then you have to decide where you would take it from.
Okay.
But as the mayor said, yeah, I guess I think that's something for you guys to work out too.
Thank you.
But I think even 1 or 2% would be smart.
Okay.
If need be, I know I have when we were looking at the income tax bump for the streets last year, or the year before last, I should say, I did put out a timeline of the income tax that went through there. We're at 1.65, we were at 1.75 last year. And I know we're now in committee almost, and we shouldn't be. The other thing I did look at historically, I think we backtracked, or Ray did, of the percentages where all the percentage income tax went. At one time, we were down to, general fund was 64%. I think ex-councilmember Baum could tell you that very well. If you look at this ordinance right here, 2005, it was 79%. It was leaned back to 74. In fact, that we're looking at a $3 million carryover in the general fund, would say that's where you want to be pulling it out of. Philosophically, I hate to see it happen, because I know that's where most of the dollars are in terms of personnel, but if you're going to start considering that, that's one place to think of.
Thank you.
And I'm not making that recommendation, but that's the discussion, because the only other place you're going to take it out is streets or recreation at this point. And some of the recreation's already earmarked by ballot that we can't really mess with. Am I correct in this? Okay. That's a committee, that's a personnel and finance committee.
We'll be having
Yes.
discussions about many finite issues. But any other general comments at this point? Okay. Thank you, Auditor Heck, for your report and for reporting good news. We're going to move on to ordinances for third reading. Ordinance 10712, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of chlorine, fluoride, salt, caustic soda, and sulfur dioxide. Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt ordinance 10712.
Second.
Thank you. Quite simply, this is just a renewal purchase of the following chlorine, fluoride, salt, caustic soda, and sulfur dioxide for the city, salt obviously for the street, and maintenance over the course of the winter. The other, I believe, Mary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're for our water and, what was the?
Sewer.
Sewer, thank you.
You can see where it comes from, all three are there.
With a purchase price not to expend up to $293,000. Thank you.
All those in favor of accepting ordinance 10712 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Ordinance is passed 6-1, I believe. Ordinance 10812, an ordinance establishing a domestic partner benefits policy for city employees, introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 10812.
Second.
And this particular domestic benefits, partner benefits policy builds on the earlier work of several other council members, notably former council member Bain, Councilmember Sands, and their work last year in establishing a domestic partner registry, and then also clarification of the code, in part based on assistance from an Ohio University group that met with Councilmember Gosney. And this particular ordinance would extend our benefits to the domestic partners of full-time city employees. And our estimated, what it does is people would need to fill out some paperwork with the city, a declaration of a domestic partnership and an affidavit of that, and an enrollment form, and meet certain criteria. And by then completing this paperwork and the passage of this ordinance, the domestic partners would be able to, or the city employees would be able to register for the domestic partner benefits on January 1 of this year.
Any questions or comments from council members? Elected officials? No?
I think it's a good thing we held this up for a while because we're looking at the finances of the situation, but from what I've been told and the way we've worked it out, it's not going to be a burdensome to our budget. And as I say, I thank Mickey Hart and the task force that put this together and kind of pushed the agenda on this from the citizens.
All those in favor of ordinance 10812 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Passed with all members. Ordinance 11012, an ordinance determining to proceed with the sidewalk improvements associated with the Grosvenor Slip project and the North Court Street Area Infrastructure Improvements Project as described in resolutions R0312 and R0412 respectively. Again, introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 11012.
Second.
And this particular ordinance is part of the sidewalk assessment process that many of us as council members have been hearing the process about it, and it began this summer. What we're doing is coordinating the improvements to the sidewalks along with several infrastructure projects that have been taking place along North Court Street and also Grosvenor and Morris Avenue areas. And this particular ordinance now enables us to move forward and proceed with those improvements so that we can complete the projects.
Mayor Weil?
Again, this is a assessment process for sidewalks and streets, mostly sidewalks at this point. It's something I'd like to see happen more often in the future, just so we can improve the sidewalks. And we always spend a certain amount of money in the mix as well, but if we can have some of the assessments coming from the property owners who benefit from it, it could spread the paving, or rather the repairs, further. So I hope that you'll get used to this process, bottom line.
And I might add, it's also part of a long-term sidewalk assessment where all of the sidewalks in the city were viewed, reviewed, and then given a ranking system. And so we now have a way to proceed in a standardized manner about the sidewalks most in need of repair. We'll proceed with those first in certain areas. So you have our backing. We will continue to come back with more sidewalk improvements. We just need to be addressing this all the time to make this a more pedestrian-friendly community, and that's one of the ways to do it. You don't, for all people, whether they're on foot, on bicycle, in a wheelchair, on a walker, we need to make it safe.
Auditor Head?
I was just going to point out that when we talk about assessing the property owners, it doesn't necessarily have to be a burden to them if they have the choice of paying for the assessments up front or spreading it out and having it added to their property tax bills for 10 years.
Or even take it on themselves if they want to repair it. If we say this, one of your ordinances, of course, necessity to repair it. If you say that and they say we can do it ourselves, and they want to, that's their option as well.
So there are several options.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of ordinance 11012 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, the ordinance is accepted. Ordinance 11112, an ordinance authorizing the auditor to reduce 2012 year-end appropriations. The Finance and Personnel Committee, represented by
I will do that.
Member Nyes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 11112.
Second.
And this particular ordinance is part of that year-end process that we were talking about earlier, where we reduce certain appropriations at the year-end to make sure that we as a city have certified the correct amount of our resources that we have available to cover our costs.
Questions? Okay. All those in favor of ordinance 11112 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance is adopted. We'll move ahead with ordinances for second reading. In general, ordinances for second reading, that's just what happens. The ordinances are read, no action is taken unless a committee chair asks for further action. Ordinance 11212, an ordinance granting the renewal of a revocable license to Keith McGrath and Ciovec, 221 and 221 and a half Columbus Road, to allow the placement of a sign on the city right-of-way. Ordinance 11412, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to submit an application and enter into a Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, WPCLF agreement, designating a dedicated repayment source for the loan and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 11512, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids for construction and construction engineering of the wastewater treatment plant facilities improvement, Project 266, and declaring an emergency.
I have a notation here that we should suspend rules on a second reading here. I'm not sure why. No? Did you get any word on that?
I received something from Jessica indicating that
Okay,
suspension.
wasn't necessary?
sorry.
Okay.
This is 11512?
11512.
Okay, we have,
But if it's not necessary from the project manager, I have no problem with it.
That was my understanding as well,
Okay.
that it wasn't necessary to suspend today.
I'm looking at the notes from last meeting, that's why, so it's probably old news.
okay. So we're going to leave it as it is,
Yes,
read for the second time.
thanks.
And now we have ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 11612, an ordinance amending the 2012 appropriation ordinance. Member Nysley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we consider 11612 under suspension of the rules. Second. And the reason for doing so is so that we may adequately pay for electric costs and also get the money transferred into personnel line items to be able to pay city employees.
All those in favor of suspending the rules on this ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The rules have been suspended for ordinance 11612.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of ordinance 11612.
Second.
And this particular ordinance has 3 sections. I'll go through them briefly, and what this does is gives us an itemized listing of the different departments that we're transferring money to or appropriating money out of. But the first one is general, $30,000 to the general fund, and what this does is cover taxpayer refunds that are due through the year end. Then $17,000 to the tourism fund, and this pays for the Athens Convention and Visitors Bureau portion of the transient guest taxes collected in October. And you may remember that the city collects a 6% tax on hotel and motel rooms, and this in turn then is, portions of it are awarded to the Athens Convention and Visitors Bureau for tourism activities in Athens City during the year. And what this does is helps cover the fuel costs and fare box revenues for Athens Transit through year end. We have $10,000 that's needed for personnel in the recreation fund, $20,000 to the community center for personnel, and then we have $50,000 to capital improvements fund for a transfer, and we'll be mentioning this in one of our other sections of this particular ordinance. What this does is this helps us with the expenses related to employees' medical claims between now and the end of the year. As I had explained earlier in our Finance Committee meeting, the city's self-insured. We make payments on medical claims. $75,000, $75,725.50 will be for a FEMA fund. And we were awarded FEMA grant monies for emergencies that we had in Athens. Part of that money has been used, and so we are about ready to be reimbursed. And then another portion of the money, the FEMA granting agency is allowing the city to use those remaining funds for some other expenses, which I will detail in just a few minutes. We need $25,000 to the water fund to cover electric costs through year end, $75,000 to the sewer fund to cover electric costs through year end. Then in section 2, what you'll see is there are inter-fund transfers, some of which these amounts have been described above. The $50,000 for the capital improvements, it comes from the capital improvements and goes to Fund 866, our internal services fund. That's the fund from which we make the medical payment claims, or the medical expenses payments. The next three, the $72,513, and then a $1,600, and then $1,500, these total the $75,000 of the FEMA grant. So a large majority of it is going to the street fund, then a smaller portion, the $1,600 to water, and $1,500 to sewer. So that's a total of $75,000. The split on it is that $42,000 pays for our previous expenses, but then the approximately $33,000 of which we had not used and that the FEMA grant said, we'd like you to use it. You've done a good job already. We'd like you to use the remaining funds. What we are intending is to fund battery backups for traffic lights at key traffic lights around the city. So if we would have a storm situation like we did in June, lights go out in high traffic areas, we'll be able to have these. And I believe at this point we only have one battery backup that's at West State Street, or West Union and Route 682. Mm-hmm. But so clearly we have high volume traffic areas in other parts of the city. Section 3 of this ordinance is a little bit confusing, but I will try and explain it. This is once again the transit funds that we need for the end of the year. What we're doing in this third section is we're decreasing the appropriation amount for transportation assistance by $8,000. And then also increasing it in another fund. That was in one account, the 500 series. And we'd be increasing it in the transaction code 300. And what this does is moves the amount from capital to supplies. And if you look above where we had $15,000 earlier, I think it's our third item down in section 1, that $8,000 down below in section 3 plus the $15,000 in section 1 are the $23,000 that are needed to operate for our portion of the Athens Transit System operations between now and the end of the year. And I think That's it.
I was going to add just a couple things. The transfer of money from the Capital Improvements Fund to the Internal Service Medical Fund is intended to be paid back. It's basically a cash flow issue right now, and as Member Nisley mentioned in committee, our intention is to increase the contributions to medical fund from each department beginning in January, so that money should be paid back next year into the Capital Improvements Fund. And just a reminder, as far as FEMA money, that we have to, when we get money from FEMA, we have to put it in a FEMA fund and then transfer it out to whatever departments are to be reimbursed for their services.
Thank you.
So rules have been suspended to allow this ordinance to be adopted at this time. All those in favor of adopting ordinance 11612 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance
quite an
is
ordinance.
adopted.
It's got a lot in there.
So we're going to move on to ordinance 11712. An ordinance amending ordinance 05812, authorizing street paving and repairs, project number 267. Member Gosnell.
Thank you. This ordinance is it's a minor amendment to an ordinance that we approved previously this year, and that was for our annual street paving and rehabilitation that the city does each year. We had a 4% increase in the total amount of work that we did, so it went from our original estimate of $400,000 up to $416,000. And so we're adding that extra $16,000 from half of it from the street fund and the other half from our street rehabilitation fund. And this increased cost was to add curb and gutter to Fort Street, and we had a lot of, we had the rock removed there, and so we wanted to make sure we did good repairs to the street, and also to repair a section of the, or pave a section of the bike path that's by the wastewater treatment plant on the east side.
This was ordinance for first reading. We have a resolution for first reading. This is a three-reading resolution. Resolution 1212, a resolution indicating the services the City of Athens will provide for the proposed annexation of approximately 15.1893 acres along East State Street as requested by the annexation petitioner and declaring an emergency. Introduced by council members Fall and Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request that we suspend the rules on this particular resolution.
Second.
The reason I request suspension, this has been discussed numerous times in committee, and the petitioners do want to go before the county commissioners to get it released, the particular property released from the county, so that the process of annexation can go forward.
Okay. We have a request for suspension of the rules on this resolution. All in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The rules have been suspended.
I move that we adopt resolution 1212.
Second.
The reason for adoption is, we've indicated before, this particular piece of property is an excellent piece for development, kind of fills in a fairly large blank on our zoning and our map. It's 15.189393 acres. And what this does is say to the county commissioners, if they release this piece of property for annexation, that we will provide water, sewer services, police, fire protection for the piece of property. Once the county commissioners release the piece of property, then we will pass an ordinance saying that we actually accept the piece of property for annexation. It's going through the same process as all the other annexations that we've gone through. To their credit, the petitioners, the owners, petitioners of the piece of property did try to go through a different process than the one determined by the Ohio Revised Code. I brought that several times before council, and I got the general feeling that it was a little too precedent-setting I don't know if the law director has any comment about that, but I think that to go forward with this before the end of the year and get it all going in the right direction, we just want to pass it.
I'd given some feedback on this before, and basically the formula which was set forth in the agreement, which while a little bit different from what is set forth in the ORC, we're talking about a difference of, I think, about $800 in total revenue over a 5-year period. So, I mean, frankly, it's a de minimis amount of money.
So I think we just want to stick with the same old process and
Sorry, minor amount of money. That's already a
thank
couple
you.
lawyer word on you there.
so that's what, okay.
Any other comments or concerns? All those in favor of adopting Resolution 1212 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The resolution is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to announcements and other business. First of all, I have a couple of...
Announcement.
Well, I do.
Tomorrow's election.
Save it. Yours is bigger than mine. Okay.
No.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone, the mayor already alluded to this, that next Monday, the city will be celebrating Veterans Day, so the city building will be closed. We will be having our regular scheduled committee meetings on Tuesday, which will be Tuesday the 13th, right here in this chamber. And that begins at 7 o'clock. Okay. Also, in this chamber, there will be a public hearing on November 26th regarding the rezoning of some properties along East State Street, rezoned from R2 to R1. In that discussion will be a public hearing, and it'll be beginning at 7 o'clock in this chamber on November 26th. We do have a very important announcement from Member Paul.
I just want to remind everybody to vote tomorrow. Polls are open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m.
Unless you've already voted early.
Unless you voted early. Thank you.
Yes, number one.
One more thing,
Oh,
because because you're having your meeting Tuesday, next, the 13th there, the zoning board of appeals will be moved back one day to the Wednesday, the 14th, just so everybody knows. Normally, it would be the same day you are, and since you probably don't want both meetings occurring simultaneously, they postponed it by one day. Just to keep you informed.
Any other members of council have anything to say? Now we have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services not covered on our agenda. And I think we have several citizens who would like to speak. I just want to remind everybody, you are allowed 3 minutes. There are some signal lights here. Green says go ahead. Yellow says you've got 30 seconds left. Red says wind it up, sit down. And at that point, we can have some public discussion if people do have questions or other concerns. So also there is a sign-up paper there. Please sign your name and address. And we won't start timing until you are done with any signing in process. Okay? Who would like to begin? Sir.
Bill Sofranic, 34 Grosvenor Street. I'd like to speak to an issue which actually myself and 2 other gentlemen are going to speak to. Some of you may recall what shall I call it, the Stimson Avenue fiasco, where there was some controversy over the action of the board of the Planning Commission. Mr. Luce drafted some proposed legislation in connection with that. Mr. Baum did some significant suggestions. I had a suggestion or two. But what I really want to address first is, and I think I've been informed that all of you have this note that I sent to Ed and to Ron. As it's been revised, the point of this little note is that we don't believe that this matter has to go to the Planning Commission, because it really doesn't alter either the number, shape, area, or the regulations within any zoning district. Rather, it's only deals with a citizen's appeal from the Planning Commission to the Board of Zoning Appeals in the event that a zoning regulation is at issue. So it's indeed, I would make two comments. If you look at the code sections, which I've attached, I think you'll find that that's what they say. The second point is, I would make, is, it doesn't make sense. Why should the Planning Commission have any say-so over, in effect, an appeal from it? It's not, it just says, it's not even telling the Planning Commission what to do, and it's not affecting Zoning Commission. So I don't know, if there's any questions on those points, I'd be open to taking them. And the only other thing I would say is that I was present when the West Side Neighborhood Association considered this matter, debated it, and I found that support for it was unanimous. I was also present when a ANA board meeting, with one exception, support was unanimous, and at an ANA picnic, support for it was unanimous, again with the exception of the same person. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lewis? Please, yeah, do sign in, please.
Thank you. My name is Ron Luce. I live at 15 West Hills Drive, Athens. And in case you didn't know it, I've been a rather outspoken opponent of some of the decisions of the Planning Commission over the past year. I want to make clear that none of that is personal toward any of the individuals, but I am concerned for the sake of the city. I believe that decisions were made that were contrary to the specific language of our codes. I provided my reasons to that group, the specific codes in question, and worked to reverse what I consider to be poor decisions, the duty of any citizen. When I asked for help from the various entities of the city that had the power, in my opinion, to countermand the actions of the Planning Commission, City Council, BZA, and the Law Director, I was met with what appeared to me to be an unwillingness to go against the decisions of the Planning Commission, even though individuals told me they agreed that they were poor decisions. I believe at the heart of a democracy is a system of checks and balances so that citizens can be assured that government is responsive to the people and the laws that we are all expected to live by. Ultimately, this city belongs to us. Yet, citizens in Athens seem to have, at this point, or at least my perception, seem to have almost no legitimate recourse when it comes to decisions of the Planning Commission. Therefore, I have put before you a set of codes that I believe will address some of those issues and that have been approved by all of the various neighborhood committees. Therefore, I ask that the council use that document that was approved and put forth a resolution redefining the role of the Planning Commission and giving citizens the right of reasonable appeal without risking their personal fortunes. I believe the Planning Commission has the right, should have the right to review and update code, but as an appointed body, it shouldn't have the right to determine its powers, which should come from this group here. The right to limit the power of the Planning Commission belongs to the elected city council members and the people they represent, the law director, and by the guidelines of the BZA. Therefore, I ask that you pass a resolution accepting those parts of the document over which you have power to alter the way the Planning Commission operates. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Ed Baum, 20 Sunnyside Drive. As the mayor referred to me as an ex-council member, I was sitting there realizing it was 16 years ago that I was elected to city council on a day that's equivalent to tomorrow, and for that I wish our law director all success tomorrow. He'll be watching the polls as I did 16 years ago. When I was first appointed to city council, I was given the responsibility of chairing the Parking and Transportation Committee, task which I think Council Member Nisley does so well today. And I didn't give a great deal of thought to the question of planning and development. I mean, it was part of the general responsibilities of all members of council, but that wasn't my purview. In my second term, I was appointed to chair the Planning and Development Committee. I became much more interested in the planning process and the kinds of things that are involved in the planning process. And I want to talk about two related things in my remaining 2 minutes and 1 second. I have my own stopwatch here to make sure that I'm on time. Two related things that I want to bring to your attention. One that's already been brought to your attention, and that is to make sure that the planning process is as open and fair and accessible to the citizens of the city of Athens as possible. Whenever things happen which perhaps some citizens don't feel should happen, there should be a way for them to seek redress and to consider alternatives. And the question is whether or not City Council has the right and responsibility to making those changes according to the sections of the Ohio Revised Code that have already been mentioned. The City Council has that. You may seek your opinions of anybody else, neighborhood associations, the mayor, the law director, and even Planning Commission. But it is your responsibility, and I recommend that you look at the proposed changes and see whether or not it would make the city of Athens a better place to live in. The second thing in my last minute that I want to talk about is something I had planned to talk about a month ago, and that is in the discussions in the planning process of the extension of the city's sewer system along Route 50. Now, I know that all of you are perfectly familiar with every single page in this document, and this document, of course, is the comprehensive plan of the city of Athens. There is a section in it which is 6 pages long. I recommend that you read very carefully, dealing with the extension of the city to US 50. And there's a couple points I wanted to mention, and that is a concern in the extension to the south of the city of any development that might take place in the future. And it talked about the need for zoning. Now, the county doesn't have zoning, and so how are you going to have zoning without the county? The only way to do that is through annexation. And so let me just read this section. Future regulatory initiatives. Much of the corridor is not in the city, so much of the existing areas, give me another 10 seconds to read this, is not zoned. With future sewer and water extensions, annexation, and new zoning would likely follow. To implement the vision for the ultimate build-out of this area, a combination of new zoning districts and existing zoning districts should be considered. Don't go south unless you have some control over it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Other citizens wish to speak at this time? Council members have anything to say? Then we will adjourn. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I forgot to ask what committees would need to meet. Finance and Personnel. Other committees that need to meet on
Planning and Development,
planning and development.
please.
And committees can always add to that agenda as you see fit. Okay, we are going to adjourn at 8:23. Thank you all. Don't forget to vote.